Hello everyone and welcome to the new series of English Literature GCSE revision videos. These videos will be used to coincide with your flashcard revision that you should complete every week in the run-up to your GCSE examinations. These videos should be used by both Year 10 and Year 11 and I really hope they're a useful addition to your revision that you will be completing. These videos should be no longer than 30 minutes, so it's a great way to just sort of slot in a quick, short revision session. This week the focus is on A Christmas Carol and we are looking at the character of Jacob Marley. Okay, before we dive in, I just want to discuss how to use flashcards. So I know a lot of you, obviously the expectation is to use flashcards for your weekly revision, and I think there's sometimes a bit of confusion how these are beneficial. So there's two ways you can create your flashcards. The first way is the way I would start using them, sort of the more detailed use for flashcards. So what I would do is on the front of your flashcard, I would write the character's name plus I'd put the key quotation on the front of the flashcard. I'd then turn the flashcard over and on the back of the flashcard I would make some notes on some key analysis that you would like to revise that matches your key quotation. You should do these for all of the quotations that you have set aside to revise for your exam. In the run-up, when you're a bit closer to your exams or you want to test sort of the endurance of your recall, what I would do is I would then switch to very simplistic flashcards. So this is where on the front of your flashcard it will have the character's name, then you would write something like times 3 quotations, and then on the back of the flashcards I would write the 3 key quotations that you are using to revise for that character. And the reason I do it like this is because by the end of your sort of run of revision sessions and the closer you get to exams, it's really important to be able to test whether you can A, recall the quotations for the specific characters you're revising for, and B, be able to check whether you can actually recite the analysis for that as well. I would keep all the flashcards in one place so that you can consistently sort of revisit and check sort of your knowledge and your understanding. If you find that you are really secure on certain characters or certain quotations, they should be put sort of to the back of the pile. And any quotations or any characters that you are sort of struggling to maintain or retain, in your head, then they're the ones that you should keep revisiting and keep practicing. Now this revisiting and this repracticing, you could do this by yourself, where you recite the flashcards off by heart, or you check the flashcards and recite them out loud, put them aside, see if you can recite the knowledge again, check your knowledge, and I would do this consistently. You can also do this in pairs, you could do it with your friends, you could rely on family members, you could elicit the help of teachers, anything like that, but that consistent sort of vocalising what is on the flashcard and being able to speak out loud certainly has a greater impact on the ability to retain the knowledge. Okay, so let's dive in then. So on the front of your flashcard, what you should write is Jacob Marley's name, and then you should also write the quotation. So the first quotation we're looking at is felt the chilling influence of its death cold eyes. On the back of the flashcard, this is where you're going to make the notes of the key analysis for this quotation. Bear in mind, there are some sort of more simplistic ideas that you could get down for this analysis, and there are some high-level inferences that you could also make according to the. Okay, so this quotation is taken from the moment Jacob Marley visits Scrooge. Okay, it is sort of first indicating that Scrooge is actually going to be taken on a transformative journey. The first thing that I would look at in this quotation is the use of the noun influence, okay? And it's this idea that in Dickens is introducing his intention of Scrooge's change and transformation throughout the novella. Obviously, that change and transformation is meant to also inspire Dickens's readership. Okay, that's the purpose of the novella, to sort of advocate for this idea that society should be responsible and take on responsibility for the welfare of others. Now, one of the main reasons I find this quotation really interesting is it's this idea that we've been introduced to Scrooge at the very beginning of the novella as we're being told that external heat and cold has very little influence on Scrooge, and he's actually got a frosty rime upon his head, so we can see that he is a intrinsically cold character, very standoffish, and has no interest in the interaction of other human beings. But now what Dickens is showing us is that with the presence of Jacob Marley, we are seeing that Jacob Marley is already sort of opening Scrooge up for this idea of change. Because originally, cold had little influence on him, but right now, Scrooge is experiencing the death cold stare of his once old friend Jacob Marley. It's interesting that both Scrooge and Jacob Marley act as a mirror image of each other, therefore allowing us to see the similarities between the two characters. Jacob Marley is there as a vehicle to allow Scrooge to be made aware of how his current actions and his current sinful, miserly behaviour will actually be punished in death. If I was to tear this quotation apart even more, I would actually analyse the symbolic nature of the eyes. Now, in literature, eyes, the symbolic nature of eyes is this idea that they are the windows to the soul. Here we can see that Scrooge is looking at Marley's death-cold eyes. Therefore, that window to the soul is shut, okay? Scrooge cannot see into Jacob Marley's soul because that soul is now non-existent. Mainly because he's dead, but also a sort of result of Marley's actions in life. We have to remember that Marley was a friend of Scrooge's. Scrooge is described as his soul executioner, soul mourner, and soul friend. Okay, so this idea that Scrooge can no longer sort of look at Marley in the eyes and see a glimmer of recognition, that would be quite frightening for Scrooge, and that's the whole purpose of this interaction between the two characters. Marley is there to frighten Scrooge into allowing himself to learn the lessons that the next three spirits will provide for him. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the next quotation. So again, just like I instructed you on the previous quotation, I would write Jacob Marley's name on the front of your flashcard, plus I would write out this quotation. And then I'd turn your flashcard over, and this is where you're going to write these analytical notes. So this is probably one of the most popular quotations for Jacob Marley. And it's often the most popular, but maybe the least deeply analysed. So what I want to provide for you here is maybe some points that you might not have thought of when you're analysing this quotation. It's obviously really obvious to sort of go in and analyse the representation of the word chains, and I'm going to break that down a little bit more for you. So here, Dickens uses Jacob Marley as a warning to both Scrooge and the reader of the consequences of avarice. Now, avarice is one of the key words that you should be using within your essays of A Christmas Carol, and for those of you who might not know what it just means excessive greed. Okay, so the first thing I want to look at before we dive into the word chains is I actually want to look at the repetition of the personal pronoun I. Okay, here we can see that Marley is showing Scrooge that he is recognising his personal responsibility. He is acknowledging, okay, that he has caused this fate himself through his own past miserly behaviour. Very much, as we said in the previous quotation, he mirrors Scrooge's personality. However, obviously, Marley has not had the chance to redeem himself. He is here to act as a warning so that Scrooge himself can redeem his own sinful qualities. I would then investigate the noun chains, and it's very obvious that these chains are symbolic of the torture that Marley is now experiencing. His past actions have forced him into this restriction. They symbolise his sins, and they are a constant weight and burden that Marley now has to endure. Not only does Dickens describe, obviously, the chains that Marley wears, it's also really interesting to note that he also describes the auditory, which just means the sound of the chains, and he describes them as making a dismal, appalling noise. This is important to note because it reinforces how this moment and this interaction between Scrooge and his old partner Marley is supposed to put the fear into Scrooge. It's in order to make Scrooge sort of take note and pay attention to Marley's warning. Without this, without that sort of terrifying experience, it would be less likely and believable for Scrooge actually to open his mind and his thoughts to the messages that he is about to receive. As I said before, this is obviously the first warning that Scrooge receives, and it's from somebody that he obviously trusts, which makes this message even more important. I would then look at the verb forged, which is really interesting because when you think of something being forged, it basically means something that is created under intense heat. It's formed and created under intense heat, which obviously symbolises the intensity of the relentless greed that Marley committed in life, which therefore is now forging his current experience of eternal damnation. But not only that, we could actually link this whole moment of Marley actually forging Scrooge's redemption, sort of he set Scrooge's redemption off, and it's the intensity and fear that the scene creates for Scrooge plus the readership that also reveals sort of the importance of redemption and enlightenment. The next quotation we're going to look at is "Mankind was my business." And here Dickens is using Jacob Marley to reveal the burden of regret. And what's happening here is Dickens and Marley obviously is offering Scrooge and the reader foresight into their own nature. And what I mean by this is Marley is allowing Scrooge the chance to redeem himself, because he is going to be able to open Scrooge's eyes to his own actions. And obviously, if you've ever heard of the phrase like hindsight is a fine thing, it's this idea if you complete actions and then you realise the wrongdoings or you realise something is not quite right, you think that you wish you had sort of known that beforehand. Whereas this is exactly what's happening for Scrooge, which is why it's foresight. He's being told before he makes those same mistakes that Marley has made. And for this quotation, the first thing that I would zoom in on would be the noun mankind. And there's a real emphasis on the importance of unity and community. Okay, the sense that we have to share responsibility, we have to take an interest in the welfare of society in order to be charitable and moral. We also have the noun business, and in this relation it's talking about how the transaction is no longer focused on profit and monetary value, but it should be the focus on societal responsibility. And Marley here is showing that he wishes he rejected the abusive nature of profit and the ability to capitalise, and his focus rather should have been on being a moral, charitable human being. I've linked it to the quotation "dismal little cell," which is the description of Bob Cratchit's work environment that Scrooge himself creates. And it's this idea that this is a complete criticism of the exploitation that occurs when people become obsessed with profit. You see this obsession turn into the neglect of the workforce, which obviously Dickens is criticising and attempting to show the readers that we should eradicate that in society. It's also important to note that obviously this is Marley's sort of consideration of what happened in the past and what he should have changed. So this idea of the use of that past tense highlights Marley's inability to change and rectify his ways, but he's offering Scrooge the opportunity not to follow in his footsteps and then suffer, sort of, as he says himself, the incessant torture of remorse. And maybe the last thing I would look at for this quotation would be the possessive pronoun my, and it's this idea that, again, Dickens is reinforcing that personal responsibility that Marley is taking, and again reinforcing that idea to Scrooge that this is the path he should be following. Okay, and that is it for today's session. I really hope you found that useful. I hope it was short enough, and obviously you can revisit this video as and when you like. You can pause it, you can make notes. So well done for sitting through this session, and I shall see you in the next video.